Welcome to another edition of the Plan Well podcast, hosted by owner and attorney of Cary Estate Planning, Paul Yokovitis.
All right, we're back for episode 5 of the Plan Well podcast, and today we have the pleasure of meeting with Jenny Bradley, who's a family law attorney and owner of Triangle Smart Divorce in Cary. She has owned her own firm for a few years now, but previous to that, worked at larger firms doing family law, has always done family law, is damn good at it, does a great job with her clients. We've had numerous clients in common, and they all sing her praises. Jenny, thanks so much for being on our show today. Will you plug any little holes that I left and give us a little bit of maybe your magic statement for the listeners?
Sure, Paul. First of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. Likewise, man, there's people we send to you, they come back and say, Paul is money. So
good. That's the goal, right? Client service.
That's right. I appreciate how well you treat our people too. And they really like our planning days with Paul that we do. Let me fill a little holes there. Let's see. Magic statement. We stop smart people from screwing up their divorces. I'll do the slightly censored version for the podcast. And that's really what it's all about. Like, been doing this now since 1998, which means this fall would be 22 years doing family law exclusively. We've seen a lot of stuff. We've seen a lot of screw-ups. We've seen a lot of people getting taken advantage of by their spouses, by bad lawyers sometimes, by financial planners, hate to say it. Mm-hmm. Unknowing and unwitting estate planners in your field doing some things that really messed up the marital estate.
Definitely.
And some other stuff. And so our goal was to start a practice that really was focused on what the client wants, and that there's no cookie cutter solution. There's no one size fits all. And there's a lot of places where you can step on a landmine and you don't even know it's there in divorce. And so to help people become more aware.
And it's about the resolution, not the fight. You're always focused on getting the best outcome without as much friction as you would normally expect from family law.
Well, and that's part of it. Like, I've been in way too many divorce battles as the lawyer where people are like, I just want to win. I want to win. And the reality is nobody does in divorce. Right? The parties don't win. The kids don't win if there's kids involved. I hate to say it about my profession. The only people that win when you fight in divorce are the lawyers.
That's it.
Because we're going to get paid, and we're going to take care of our family and our staff with what we get paid, and I'm not saying we shouldn't get paid for what we do, because we do, the lion's share of the heavy lifting. Mm-hmm. But it's no joke that litigation creates friction, and litigation creates expense, and litigation creates a lot of bad feelings you didn't have otherwise. And I've yet to see, I'm sure they're out there, but they don't come back to me and tell me these stories. I've yet to see a couple that went through a really contentious litigated divorce be able to sit side by side at their kid's graduation and think, well, nobody's doing that right now. But, back before COVID, not be able to sit at their kid's graduation or wedding or anything like that, and the kids not still feel tense, or the people around them tense, or anything else. I had one client tell me that their daughter was having 2 weddings because she couldn't have both of them at the wedding. I thought, how bad is that? So divorce doesn't have to be destructive, Paul. Maybe that should be our secondary tagline.
Trademark.
So that's what we try to do, is get people through the process with as little friction as possible. That doesn't mean that we don't have to put our gloves on and go to court every once in a while and duke it out. But we don't go there with the intent of winning anything. We go there with the intent of trying to get a better deal for our client than we were able to get in settlement for whatever reason.
Yeah, and what we see, I think, sometimes in my practice in family law, or rather not my practice, but my industry, estate planning, is a susceptibility for clients to be taken advantage of based on their emotion. So with estate planning, it's fear. It's fear that something terrible is going to happen, and it could be a valid or totally fabricated fear. But the knowing, supposedly fiduciary lawyer takes advantage of that fear to basically amplify and sell the top dollar. Divorce lawyers, same thing. They seize on emotion. They see spite and they take advantage of it. They see, a wronged spouse, someone who was cheated on, and say, you need to pound this guy into the ground, kind of thing. And this is how we do it. We'll take him to court and we'll fight it out. And what I've valued and seen as a massive value for your clients that we've worked with is your ability to rein in expectations, to actually set the framework of what you should expect realistically in a divorce proceeding, but also sort through the mess and actually get to a point of what is the actual solution, what's the goal, and what gets us there quickest, instead of how can we go to court as many times as possible and pad the file and toss it around the file or the office and see who can bill and that kind of thing. And I think that's a massive, massive benefit to anybody considering divorce, is straightforward, transparent, objectives, solutions. That's it. Get them there.
Yeah, I mean, that's me. I have two other lawyers here who do most of the legal work now. I'm not quite as much in the everyday of the legal work as I am more in the...
Somebody's got to run the ship, right?
Yeah, strategy of the legal case still. Like, I just had a strategy meeting yesterday with one of our lawyers over the phone about a mediation that's coming up. So still doing that. And then, as you said, running the ship of the law firm and growing the law firm and finding more good lawyers who are like-minded with us to do the same type of thing that we do. You know, so many times in divorce, people want to fight over principle. And principle doesn't get it done, and principle doesn't pay the bills, and principle doesn't bring you to closure. And, you know, there's just a personality type out there that wants to fight and fight just to fight. And those aren't the people that we enjoy working with, and we try to steer them towards lawyers that we know enjoy that kind of thing. So, you know, we're not for everyone, but that's okay, because there's plenty of people like us who think, hey, divorce doesn't have to be destructive. I don't want to, you know, spend tens of thousands of dollars on my divorce. And, you know, we still do good service for them because we can settle it with, like you said, as little friction as possible, and as much of a divorce can be amicable and friendly, you know, we do it that way. And there's a lot of good people out there who got into a relationship, Paul, and they just realize, you know, we've now outgrown each other. And they don't have animosity. So why go try to create some for them? I mean, don't create a wedge that isn't already there. Just work with what you got.
That's it. That's exactly it. So with that in mind, what sort of things are you seeing changing over the last few months with COVID? We should probably date stamp this. This is May 12th. So we're still in COVID. You know, we're past the stay home order, but things definitely haven't gotten back to normal yet. So what does your practice look like? What are your clients experiencing? How have things differed over the last couple of months?
Yeah, so I will definitely say there's been a lot more phone calls of people wanting to reduce their support or be worried about whether they're going to get their support just because of all the unemployment and the shutdown. And, you know, we're fortunate that we have a good lobby as lawyers, and lawyers got deemed an essential business and we could keep going. Even with that, though, half my staff is working from home, and we're closed to the public as far as in-person meetings. With the exception of notarization, because until last week, we didn't have any sort of way to do a notarization other than in person, and we still kind of don't. The new bill doesn't really solve anything whatsoever. Right. So I hope that North Carolina will seize upon this opportunity to be innovative and do something like Virginia has done with actual video notarization and remote notarization. So we're seeing that. As you said, you know, I think we all kind of operated under this illusion of things were certain in the world. And now everybody's like, oh, in this uncertain time, you know, and you and I do a lot of mindset work, and we know that, hey, every time is an uncertain time. But what that's doing is people are now actually coming face to face with that truth and that reality, and they're scared. You know, they're very fearful. And so we're getting less phone calls right now, I think in part because people don't want to make any decisions when they're in a fear kind of situation. In part, I think because people have been sheltering in place with their spouse, and it's kind of hard to get away and have a confidential conversation about wanting to end your marriage. Right. But I also think that from the calls that we're getting, that people that weren't in the healthiest relationship to begin with are starting to feel the pressure build upon them by being in the home with the kids, with their spouse, and the tensions are running high, and they're getting very, very frustrated. And I really worry about people's mental health during this time frame. We're out of our usual routine. We're not going to the store. We're not going to work. We're not going to the gym. We're not doing a lot of things that we did to blow off steam and have outlets. And it's all focusing back in the house. So we have had an uptick in domestic violence. I'm sorry to report that, but we have. We've definitely had uptick in clients calling, complaining about how the kids are being treated in the other house. And we've had some really sad things that have come out of this fear-based and that we're in this odd time frame right now where we're not really doing the things we used to do. On the other hand, we had some folks that we've met with before who have thought about separating, and we've counseled them to like, hey, you might be throwing in the towel too soon. Here's some things you should do to try to improve your relationship. And we've actually had some positive calls when we've been checking in on those folks to say, like, this time has really caused us to slow down, to shut out the noise, and to go back and to focus on what we truly want in our lives and what's important, and they're working through some issues in their relationship. So that's been great too. So I kind of had a tale of two cities.
Are you seeing some intricacies in shared custody during this time, and what this is creating with social distancing and that kind of thing?
We've definitely had. Well, I should give it two perspectives. One, I'll give it the perspective as the lawyer representing someone with custody, and then two, Lisa LaFonte in my office does court-appointed or parent-agreed to parenting coordinator work. Mm-hmm. You and I know what that is, but just a little brief explanation for the listeners. Basically, the judge says, hey, you guys are high conflict enough that I don't want you coming into court every time somebody sneezes and you have a problem with it. So I'm going to appoint a parenting coordinator to help facilitate your parenting relationship and make your kids' lives better. Yeah. And so the parenting coordinator has sort of quasi-judicial decision-making. The decision is binding, but you can always go to court and say, hey, I don't like what this parenting coordinator said. Mm-hmm. So right out of the gate, when COVID started here, the people that were already very high conflict and didn't like the custody schedule that had been ordered, or were already in that, hey, my kid's 10 and says she doesn't want to go visit her dad, so I'm not going to make her. Those kinds of folks saw this as an excuse and a way to bolster things. Yeah. And I thought Lisa gave them great advice. She basically said, like, if you are sheltering in place and truly quarantining yourself in your home and you're not letting anything in from the outside world and you're not going anywhere, okay, we can talk about this and see if this makes sense. But if you're going to the grocery store, if you're having food delivered to your house, if you're taking your kid, at that point, playgrounds were open. If you're taking your kid to the playground, you're still taking your kid to daycare, you're still doing all this other stuff. You can't use COVID as an excuse not to visit. Then we got more guidance from the county. Then we got more guidance from the governor about what was shutting down and whatnot. And people seem to calm down a little bit. Mm-hmm. The biggest concern has been for the parents that have folks that are healthcare workers. And they've been very concerned about protocols being followed, and they've expressed fear about their child getting exposed because of the healthcare situation and what germs may come home, because the reality is we don't know a damn thing about this virus. We are learning more and more every day, but now we're seeing a whole new inflammatory response if a kid has been infected. So they might not even showed symptoms of COVID, but now they're having heart failure because of the inflammatory response. Right. We don't know. So it's tough to balance because kids have a right to have a relationship with both parents. But both parents also have the right to protect the safety of their kids. Right. And so if this was the regular flu, what we would tell our clients are, hey, we can't tell you to violate a custody order, but if in your opinion, your child is going to be exposed to the flu, maybe you all could work together and agree that, hey, it doesn't make sense to come over and do this visitation this weekend. Well, that's fine on a short-term basis with the regular flu. It doesn't last very long, and we have Tamiflu, and the kid can have a flu vaccine and all that stuff. We don't have that with COVID. Right. And so that's been super tough. The Supreme Court Justice of North Carolina came out with some guidelines for custody and basically said your order is your order, but you've also got to be a parent. And we hope that you'll work together and use common sense during this time frame, but we expect we're going to be dealing with a lot of contempt of court motions when we open back up. But we've had clients who are healthcare workers who are like, you know what, I'll do Zoom calls and FaceTime calls with my kid, and I don't want to expose my kid to anything.
Yeah. And they're just being the mature person in that respect and doing what's best for their family. Yeah.
They are. And fortunately, that's most all of our clients. The most of the calls we've had are on the Lisa's PC side, the parenting coordinator stuff. But we did have a few clients in the beginning concerned and said to their spouse, like, what are you doing to protect yourself? What precautions are you using at home, et cetera, et cetera? And that spouse said something like, I'm not going to tell you that. Well, a cool-headed lawyer on the other side said, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And then the healthcare worker spouse spelled out everything that was going on. Now we have to trust that's being followed, of course, but
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to catch COVID. So I trust that somebody's going to follow the precautions if they're in the healthcare world, that they're probably even more so than perhaps you or I might.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I know there's a lot of talk, certainly in legal realms and whatnot, but even in the news and whatnot of there's this expected bottleneck that's going to burst when all this goes back to normal, this massive surge in divorce cases and custody disputes and that sort of thing. So what are, in your opinion, and this is going to be, whether we had COVID or not, anybody who's a married individual, what are some general points that the average person who's considering divorce should consider or remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is if you are really considering it, now's a good time to talk to a lawyer, a financial planner, and a therapist. I call it the three-legged stool. A lawyer, because you want to know, generally speaking, what's your rights, what are your responsibilities. And you don't want to confuse Google with somebody else's law degree. There's a lot of information on Google, but there's a lot of bad information on Google, and North Carolina law isn't New Jersey law. And so people say a lot of things on the internet that just aren't true. And I know you see that in your profession as well.
Absolutely.
The other thing is the financial planner, because if you do have assets such as house and retirement and other things, you want to think about what makes sense for you about dividing them moving forward. I see a lot of people really hold on to that real estate, and give up claims in retirement. And that may not be the smartest move for you.
Right.
And then the other thing with the therapist is like, things are going to change. We all have that inner voice inside of us. It's a little cynic and a little skeptical and a little bit doubter, and it's there to keep us safe. And so a lot of folks stay in a relationship that isn't the best for them because it's the known. The proverbial devil we know is better than the devil we don't.
Right.
And so when you start making a change, your subconscious throws up all kinds of stuff that's not true, but it's trying to protect you. And so having a therapist to help you sort through some of that noise, I think, is a good idea, no matter what situation we're in. Now with COVID, I do think there is going to be a surge because our courts have been closed as far as anything being heard other than emergency type stuff until recently. Wake County courts, where you and I practice, just started allowing divorces that both sides consent to and don't have any objection to be held by WebEx.
That's a good start.
Yeah. Emergency hearings have been able to go forward. Domestic violence have been able to go forward. But other than that, no hearings right now. And so everything that was scheduled in March, April, May is being pushed down the road. Well, those calendars are already full. There's only 6.5 hours in a regular court day. And if you ever go look at a Wake County family court calendar, you'll usually see about 20 to 30 hours jammed in there. So now they're jamming those things onto the existing calendars and pushing stuff down the road. And so if you wait till the court's open and you file in June or July for stuff, I have no idea when there are going to be court dates if you have court. That being said, we've been using this time to get hyper-focused on the cases that don't need court and trying to get those resolved and settled. And if there's consent orders, we're finding those coming back from the judges faster than ever before. If we have to file a lawsuit because we have to have retirement divided and federal law requires we have a lawsuit for that, we're able to file right now. So when I say court's closed, I mean for hearings. You can still file. And you can do that. So, I mean, there's no good time to do anything when it comes to the court system, because it's always slow and it's backlogged and it's back jammed, but I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So all the more reason to use, if you have two reasonable, most of the time, adults that can work out their thing, all the more reason to get started with, counsel now, so that you can get worked out and not find yourself in that logjam known as the court system.
And that's a really good point, is the separation process doesn't necessarily start with filings. So just because the hearings aren't happening doesn't mean you can't get separated, or you can't start, rolling the ball down the hill for the process of separation and asset division and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think people are under a misconception that they have to be separated before they can work stuff out, and that's not true. In fact, our better cases are the ones where two parties can work it all out and have the plan for how they're separating. And the other thing I would add to that, Paul, is that this is a good time to get your handle on your budget too, and gathering documents, because you're in the house. If you are still sheltering in place, and not everybody is, but you can start. It amazes me how many people still don't know how much money it costs them to live.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you see it too.
Yeah, for sure.
Two households live more expensively than one household. I think that's a known fact. And so it's a good time to start getting your planned budget in place for how this is going to financially work.
Yeah. And I did some family law prior to law school graduation at another local firm, and then in the courts here with one of the district court judges. And then when I was in Michigan still, I did some family law paralegal work. And one of the common themes that I saw was just a total inability to comprehend life independently with the assets you currently have. Like you mentioned earlier, people just sort of grab onto that real estate and say, well, I want the house. I'm going to stay in the house. I'll refinance it in my own name. But if you have a house that has a, $3,000 a month budget, and the only work that you're qualified to do is, $40,000 to $50,000 a year, salary, that's not within the realm of possibility. That's just not reality. And so part of it is, I think, starting from the outset with the appropriate expectations and saying, this is what a life post-divorce could look like for you. And so that's what we need to plan for, and try to get the best possible asset division that's going to be supportive of that life, instead of saying, hell yeah, we're going to get you that house.
Yeah. I mean, I have a client right now who's hell bent on keeping the house, and I'm scratching my head going, I don't even know how you could qualify to refinance it.
Right.
And the reality is, typically husbands are not going to want to stay on a mortgage forevermore, because it locks up their credit for what they can buy.
Right.
And
especially with the mortgage interest deduction is not really even that beneficial anymore.
Right. And it causes problems for them if the wife doesn't pay the mortgage, and so, and they don't want to come off title if they're still on the mortgage, all of which are reasonable things we advise the, we'll call it the supporting spouse, all things are which we advise the supporting spouse not to do, not to screw up their divorce, right? Mm-hmm. Don't come off title if you're not coming off the mortgage. Don't let somebody have the house and not refinance it. I mean, those are all things when the shoes are on the other side that we advise people to do. So it's just, realistic expectations are difficult. You got a family of 4 living on $80,000. It's a good wage, but it ain't a lot to go around when you divide it into 2 houses in Cary.
Right.
Or even 2 apartments in Cary, assuming you're going to want a 3-bedroom place because you don't want the kids to share a room. It's a big assumption, but if they're but that's usually what people want.
Yeah, and I think at least what I saw and what I've seen with clients since is you sort of get these almost keeping up with the Joneses expectations of maintaining the existence for the kids that they had already had, like the country club membership, the schools they were in, and those sorts of things. And if they no longer have that home, those aren't their reality anymore. Or maybe the other spouse has the upper hand because they're the ones that can provide those experiential things moving forward.
If anything good comes out of COVID, I hope it's societal wide, that we get a little bit away from our wants and we go back to our needs.
Yeah. That's the point.
And that we reset things that are important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I can't speak to your childhood, but my childhood growing up, you know, I changed schools. It didn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
I changed different teams because that league wasn't working out, or the reality was that league didn't have enough coaches to play softball. So I had to play Little League baseball with the boys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I was the only girl on the team. And that was, you know, good and bad in some ways, but it was still fun because I was out there playing as opposed to sitting on the sidelines, which would have been the choice if my mother hadn't said, hey, let's change leagues so that you can still play something. You know, and kids are a lot tougher than we give them credit for. And a lot of what they want to know is they want to feel loved. They want to feel taken care of. They want to feel like their parents give a crap about them, and they want to be heard, you know, and somewhere along the way, like we became this, I won't say nation of, because now I'm getting really cynical and on soapbox, but some people in this nation became very entitled. And I think that's great that you want to provide the best for your kids. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is there's just some things that aren't as important as some other things. Like having your kid in 9 activities like we see sometimes. I can't imagine when I was a kid if I had been that overscheduled, like what that would have done to me. It was already bad enough having 3 activities and homework, you know, and homework's more now than you and I ever had. It's over my head now. I can't help the high schooler with his homework anymore. You know, so you're going to tutors and you're doing this and you're doing that, and you're doing that and whatever else. And it's like, when's the fun time?
Right.
When's the playtime? And so I'm kind of hoping that this like reset we've had to take in our lives because of COVID, maybe a little bit of it will stick.
Yeah, that would be great. Kind of in that vein, you know, we talked about the things that people see as important and what potentially really truly is important. Why do you think it's important for potential clients or people who are looking out and sort of surveying the land for options for divorce? Why should they use a family lawyer instead of, you know, utilizing digital forms and going the pro se route or serving as their own lawyer or unrepresented? Yeah.
I used this analogy, I don't remember where before, but it seemed to work for a lot of people. So I'll give it a try here and see if it works for your folks. You know, yeah, there's a lot of people out there in the world that can handle their own divorce. And if that's all you got, you don't have any kids, you were married, you've been separated for a year, there aren't any assets, by all means, go pay $8 at the courthouse, get the kit, pay $225 of a filing fee, take 3 different days off work and go to the courthouse and get yourself divorced.
Right.
You know, no problem. That's simple. That's what I call, like, can I change a light switch in my house? Yeah, I'm comfortable with that level of electricity. Sure, I can do that. You know, but when you start getting into higher things like changing out the breakers in the box or rewiring the house or, you know, putting in a new outlet or doing this or doing that, it gets a little bit more complex. And there's a lot more nuances and there's a lot more things that can go wrong. And so not to play on people's fear, because I hate when lawyers do that, but the reality is if you get divorced and you haven't made a claim for property division, you're screwed for ever asking for it again.
Yeah.
People don't know that. They're like, oh, I've been separated for a year, I'll go get divorced. And then they'll come to us and say, I need to divide the retirement. And we're like, but you already got divorced and you didn't make a claim. You're screwed.
Yeah.
You know, people sign these agreements that are on the internet. I won't name any names.
Right.
And they don't have alimony waivers in there and they don't address alimony at all. And so it comes time to get divorced and the dependent spouse asks for alimony. Supporting spouse comes and sees us and says, hey, we signed this separation agreement. We got it off the internet. It was supposed to take care of everything. And I was like, but it doesn't have a waiver in there for alimony. It's silent on the issue. And our law says if it's not addressed, it's still alive.
Yeah. Or the nuances of North Carolina probably doesn't have a third-party tort waiver in it and those sorts of things, right?
May not. It may not. You know, and then with kids issues, I think it's great that people believe that they can get along and they can work it out. But I think that they need default schedules and default guidelines if they can't. Right. And so we'll see a lot of people separate and they'll go on for 2 or 3 years and they're like, you know, I'm only seeing my kid every other weekend and I want to do more. Okay. Well, what's your agreement? Well, we don't really have one. So I've been doing every other weekend for 3 years. I hate to tell them, but they sort of established a pattern there, a status quo. And unless there's a really good reason to change it, our judges are really resistant to doing things differently if it's working. You know, the kid's doing good in school, the kid's in activities, kids well groomed, taken care of, getting to the doctor, this, that, and the other. Hey, it might be right that you have a legitimate right to see your child more often, but if you haven't been doing it for 3 years, it's hard just to upset the apple cart with no good reason. Mm-hmm. You know, so I think people need to understand what their options are. And then if they want to go on their own and they want to rewire their house by themselves or completely replumb it or whatever else, that's on them at that point. We've done our job by advising them of what their choices are and what the pitfalls are of giving it a go alone. But I just think there's so many, like I said at the very beginning of this podcast, landmines out there that they're not even aware of. You know, frankly, Paul, they just don't know what they don't know.
Yep. And I say that all the time. And judges aren't going to tell you the law. They're going to tell you when you're in compliance of it or not. And just like, right. Clerks of court on the estate side, same thing. They're going to tell you what is lacking, but they're not going to tell you why or how to fix it. But it's also, I think the home improvement analogy is always a good one. I use flooring and roofing all the time. Because absolutely, you could check out all the YouTube videos you want that will, quote unquote, prepare you to lay your own roof. But are you prepared to deal with the potential ramifications of a roof that, is not appropriately installed? And then the same things, for consideration with a divorce that doesn't go the right way. You can't undo it. I mean, once that divorce decree is entered, you don't get a mulligan to start over again just because you forgot the post-separation and alimony claims or the ED claims or what have you. Same thing was you can't change your DIY will after you're dead, right? No one can retroactively improve that and make it better for you. But you hit the nail on the head. The very last thing you said is you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of law generally is not the products that you create or the tools you use, it's how they're used. It's that $10,000 for 1 minute, analogy. It's you paid me for the experience. You didn't pay me for the paper that I printed out of my paper or on my printer. In that same vein, so why would anybody pick Triangle Smart Divorce over any other, family law firm? What makes y'all unique?
I mean, I don't know that makes us unique, but I think what makes us slightly different is, first of all, we're not buttoned up. Like, this is about as dressed up as I get. And I own 2 suits, and those are for court and funerals.
Right.
And so
only when absolutely necessary,
right? Only when society requires them. And so we're pretty laid back. That doesn't mean that we're pushovers, but we're laid back. We're not stuffy. We're there for you. We, combined experience of the lawyers in my law firm doing family law, we're over 50 years experience, and there's only 3 of us. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. We don't have some rookie fresh out of law school lawyer that's going to learn on your case. And that's bad of me to say because I was one of those 22 years ago, and I had a boss who let me do that. Mm-hmm. But let me do it in a very old English apprenticeship sort of way. Mm-hmm. Very much unlike I see these days in a lot of places where they're like, oh, new lawyer, you're on your own. Or worse yet, lawyers who aren't finding jobs anywhere and hanging out their own shingle and doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I mean, the worst thing for you probably is when you have a family lawyer that does some estate planning on the side.
Yep.
And I can't stand it when an estate planning lawyer does some family law because, again, you don't know what you don't know. And I don't know what I don't know. I know enough to be dangerous about family law and to say, oh, you need to consult with Paul about this.
Yep.
How many how many agreements have you seen, Paul, that just have horrendous provisions in there about, and we'll create a trust to provide for the kids, period.
Yeah.
And
right.
You're like, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
So the thing
language. We wish that it'll be in trust, So
the thing we do that I know that good family law firms in town also do is we consult with the people in the areas where we're not experts.
Right.
You know, we bring you in, we bring financial planners in, we bring criminal lawyers in when there's overlapping charges. We've brought real estate lawyers in before. We've certainly
Probably
brought plenty of
immigration, I would imagine, probably comes into the fold.
immigration, business lawyers. You know, we're not one size fits all. We're going to bring you a team to you that we work well with and have an integrated approach so that the right hand and the left hand are working and rowing in the same direction.
Yep.
And we're not going all kinds of other places. Because we're small, I think we're able to do that a little bit more than maybe some larger firms who feel like they need to, you know, try to be everything to everyone. At the same time, I think the other thing that you get at our firm is we try to push as much down to the paralegals as possible, so you're not paying the lawyer rate for doing paralegal stuff.
Right.
And paralegal stuff like gathering documents, doing initial drafts, helping the documents get organized and put together on spreadsheets, and sitting down with you and reviewing your budget and all those kinds of things. You know, the ladies in the law firm here do that 20 times better than I could ever do it, because that's what they do. And that's their training. That's their bread and butter. That's what they love. You know,
like communicating with the court, setting things for calendar and that kind of thing. That's not something a lawyer should have to do or bill for, you know, or that the client should have to pay lawyer fees for.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So, you know, I don't know that that makes us per se unique in any way, but I do think it makes us different in that we're very transparent about all of it. And we're very open with our clients about the process. And, you know, a lot of law firms are kind of like magical, don't look behind the curtain.
Right.
And we're very like, this is your team, come meet every member of your team. This is your point person. This is, you know, who you're going to go to with these types of questions. This is who you go to with those types of questions. And I think it's just better for everyone. You know, if it's kind of like when your mechanic actually brings you out to your car and shows you the brake pads.
Yeah.
He's coming in and saying you need new brakes. You know, sometimes people just need to see with their own eyes, even if they don't completely understand it and can't put the caliber on it and do the measurements in the millimeters, you know, that, okay, I see what the problem is here, and I trust you to help me fix it.
That's it. Well, and I think it just speaks to an overall focus on what's important, not on the process. It's not making sausage. It's the end product. It's not, you know, putting emphasis on lipstick and satin gloves. It's the resolution itself. It's not the mechanism of, we've got to go to court as much as we possibly can if the client just cares about getting a fair division and fair custody and that kind of thing. And so it doesn't matter what you dress like. It doesn't matter the mechanism of delivery. It's that you got them there in the most effective and efficient way. And that speaks to just an overall focus of the client experience and the client outcome being the priority, not the firm sort of holding up this image of you know, proper lawyers or you know, their faces on everything or what have you. And you know, first and foremost, you're called Triangle Smart Divorce, not Bradley Family Law, right? That I think speaks highly too, is you're not full of yourself. I mean, it's always been, at least as long as I've known you, it's a focus on the team and a focus on the end results for the clients. And there's never an emphasis on churn or passing the file around. It's always resolution. And that's been something that I have always appreciated in the clients we've shared. Yeah,
and it's been even in our case, you know, if someone meets with me and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, you know, my personality is not best suited for this person.
Yep.
Because I am more direct and a little bit less, I won't say I'm not compassionate or empathetic, but I don't wear it as well as I wear being direct.
Yeah.
And sometimes people need a little bit softer approach. Well, hey, we'll look at the file and we'll sit down and we'll meet with the client and with another lawyer in my office I recommend and say, hey, we're going to transition this file to this lawyer and here's why. Because I think this will be a better fit for you. Mm-hmm. And I think thus it'll be a better outcome for you and a better experience for you. And, you know, there's not a legal fee to be paid for me getting the other lawyer up to speed for everything I already have in my head.
Right.
Because, you know, the way that we take notes and we share notes, it's all already there. Now, yes, I'm going to meet with that lawyer probably over lunch, which we would have to eat anyway, because if you know me, you can't have me hangry. And give them the 30-minute overview and say the details are in the file, but here's the overview and here's the strategy I had in mind. Here's where we're going. But that's not a billable expense to the client if we're doing a handoff like that. Yeah, nor should it be, right? It's getting someone else up to speed to figure out how to do it instead of you, right? And
That's great. Now we'll move sort of to the end portion of the interview. It's the hot seat, quote unquote. It's what most people would call it. I couldn't think of a better name for it, so we kept it that way. So first, what is a show that you're currently obsessed with?
This one's hard for me.
Let's say Tiger King.
This one's hard for me, Paul, because I'm such a sports buff.
Yeah, right. So The Last Dance?
Nothing on TV. Like, I was watching Cornhole this weekend.
Nice. Not Korean baseball?
Well, I have been watching some Korean baseball because, Korea got the same memo we got in January and apparently did things differently. So,
right. And they're back to it.
So I will say the show I'm going to binge watch this weekend is The Last Dance.
Nice. Yeah, we're about halfway through it. This past weekend, they had the first UFC fight back. It was UFC 249 in Jacksonville Saturday night.
Apparently, he didn't care about taking a punch.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And of course, no one was masked up inside the ring, but it was just the most awkward display of competition I've ever seen. The fight itself, the exact same, but you can literally hear every word that comes out of the coach's mouths when it's usually drowned out by noise, and it's just so awkward. One of the guys who was walking out, he walked out to The Greatest Showman, which I thought was hilarious, and he was acting like sort of waving to the crowd, like everyone was there, just sort of embracing, the reality of the moment. But very awkward, and they're going to have 2 more fights this week just to try to catch up, where they were. But yeah, it's weird. Last Dance is good though. We just got through episode 5. I think you'll like it a lot. I think.
And we'll try to binge watch it as much as I can this week. Right.
Well, and I think episodes 7 and 8 come out this week, or 6 and 7. So you should have that. They're about an hour a piece. You'll have plenty to watch, but they're all really good. And it harkens back to the 80s and the 90s, the more aggressive era of basketball. So I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing Bill Laimbeer punch somebody in the nose.
That's it. Yeah. And they obviously, from Michigan, huge Bad Boys fan. They talk about the 88, 89, 90 runs with the Eastern Conference and that kind of thing, the changing of the guard from the Celtics to the Pistons to the Bulls. All really cool, all really interesting.
Yeah, I guess my guilty pleasure, though, is I tape Jeopardy every day and I watch it.
Nice.
That's the trivia buff in me.
That's right. If you had a few hours to yourself on any given weekend, where would we find you and what would you be doing?
Oh, God, right now I'd be sleeping.
Right. Rest and recovery. It's important for everyone. What is the one book that you recommend the most?
God, Paul, I read so much. That's so hard. I just read it this weekend, and I sat down and I read it in one setting. So I'm just going to say this one for now because it spoke to a big problem I have, and I think some of my clients have too. Brene Brown's book, Gifts of Imperfection. Mm. And it basically talks about why the perfectionism that you have in your life is causing so much depression and anxiety issues and how to change that.
No, that sounds like a great one. My wife's a huge fan of hers. I've yet to pick up any of her books, but it's just because I've had other like business books in front of it and that kind of thing. So I'll definitely have to get around to that one.
Yeah, I put Traction aside this weekend to read that one. So
such a good one. Traction's probably one of my favorites. What are your 3 favorite podcasts?
I listen a lot to Successful Mind with David Nagel.
Love that one.
This won't surprise you, but Barstool Sports.
There you go.
And I don't have any more in my queue right now, but let's see.
No lawyer marketing or anything like that?
I probably should do that, Paul.
I like Lawyerist, Maximum Lawyer are always on my rotation.
How I Built This is in there too.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, I like that. That's a good show.
And then Mike Michalowicz has one, Entrepreneurship Elevated. I really like all of Mike's books. But I'm woefully behind on my podcast because I've pretty much just been doing David Nagel mindset stuff.
You did Art of Success this last week, right?
You did. I did. And it was quite different not being a live event. Definitely did not have the same level of energy, but still really good hit at home kind of teachings. I've
got all the replays sitting in my inbox waiting to go parse back through this week. That's on my agenda for sure. And
David's biggest thing is that you will manifest in your life what you dwell upon. Mm-hmm. So have an attitude of gratitude and be grateful for the things instead of being like, oh, like right now with COVID, like I'm grateful, for you. I'm grateful for the extra time I've had to spend with my kids and my wife.
Yeah, that's it.
And for me, it's like, I'm grateful the business is a little slow right now because it's giving me a chance to do these things that I never do, like podcasting and other stuff.
Yeah. And reading Brene Brown.
Instead of bitching about not having clients and not having the phone ringing as much and business being down and all those things. Let's do some stuff that we haven't been able to do.
That's it. And then you'll look back in three months from now when you're, knee deep in new clients and think, man, it was nice having a little extra time.
Right. That's the thing, stop being one of those people that's always wishing for the opposite of what you have. Just Be grateful for what you got and, see the lessons and what you can learn in that. That's David's big ass, probably message of all of them.
And it's wise words for sure. Finally, where can our listeners find you online? What are your social handles and what's your website?
Yeah, so the website is www.trianglesmartdivorce.com. On Facebook as trianglesmartdivorce.com. On Insta, I never remember if this one's Triangle Smart Divorce or if it's the other one, so I have to look.
No, you're fine. But all of your handles are under Triangle Smart Divorce. There aren't any other Triangle Smart Divorces, I assume, since we're the only triangle in the area.
There are not any other Triangle Smart Divorces I know of, unless the Bermuda Triangle has come up with something.
I hear divorce is big.
And I think so the one that's different is Twitter, because it wouldn't allow me to have all the letters.
Okay.
It's a long name and such a long handle. So it's T-R-I, Smart Divorce.
Perfect. Great. And, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great experience, great interview. I hope you got a lot out of it, and I hope our listeners, more than anything, got a lot out of it of options they could have and what they should be doing right now.
Thanks, Paul. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I thank you again for all the good work you do for our clients.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody who's listening. Again, this is the episode 5 of the Plan Well podcast.
That's it for this week's episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. We'll see you all next time.